What does it actually mean to feel close to your spouse? Most people hear the word intimacy and immediately think about sex, but sexual intimacy is only one part of connection. You can be sexually active and still feel emotionally alone. You can sleep in the same bed and feel like strangers. You can manage a home, raise children, pay bills, attend church, go to family events, and complete all the responsibilities of marriage without feeling deeply known by the person beside you. And maybe that is where you are right now. You're still married, but you no longer feel like a we. You feel more like roommates, or co-parents, or business partners managing a complicated household. Maybe you've been focusing so much on the problems in your marriage that you have not known how to rebuild the actual connection. Or perhaps you keep thinking that the answer is more date nights, or better communication, or more physical affection. But those things don't seem to reach the deeper issue. So today I want to give you a much broader way of understanding intimacy. This is something I recently learned through Dr. Matt Townsend. His teachings have influenced many of the relationship concepts that I use with my clients, and I want to make sure I give him the credit for the framework that I'm going to share today. There are 7 dimensions of intimacy that help us understand how a couple becomes connected, and those dimensions are physical, emotional, social, intellectual, experiential, spiritual, and sexual. And as I walk through them, I want you to listen for 2 things. First, where is your marriage already strong? And second, where have you stopped reaching for each other? This is not an exercise in blame. It is not a way to prove that your spouse is failing. It's a way to gain clarity about what kind of connection may be missing and what you can begin building. Hey there, welcome to the Focus Podcast with Taralee. This is the place where we talk about real life, real relationships, and how to grow through it all. If you're looking for simple mindset shifts, better communication, and deeper connections, you're in the right spot. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Focus Podcast. I'm Taralee Eddington, and I help people navigate marriage crisis with more clarity, emotional steadiness, and intentional action. And if your marriage feels uncertain, disconnected, or stuck, this episode will help you see intimacy in a much bigger and more hopeful way. Let's begin with the first dimension. Physical intimacy is not the same as sexual intimacy. Physical intimacy includes the small, non-sexual forms of touch that communicate affection and communicate comfort, warmth, and belonging. It's holding hands in the car. It's sitting beside each other on the couch. It's placing your hand on your spouse's shoulder. It's giving them a kiss before leaving the house. It's resting your head against them, offering a hug at the end of a difficult day. Dr. Townsend talked about the value of a 20-second hug and the way safe touch can support the release of oxytocin, which we know is often connected to bonding. But I don't want you to turn this into another formula. It's not about standing there with a timer thinking, okay, 15 seconds, 5 more seconds, and we will finally be connected. The point is to slow down long enough to communicate something through your body. You can communicate, I'm here, you matter, we're safe in this moment. Physical intimacy often disappears quietly. One spouse reaches out and gets rejected. One spouse worries that affection will automatically create an expectation for sex. One feels too hurt to touch. The other feels too rejected to keep trying. And over time, both become guarded. I work with couples who can sit on the same couch and leave an entire cushion between them. They're not necessarily trying to punish each other. Their bodies have simply learned caution. Sometimes rebuilding begins with removing the pressure. Can you offer affection without expecting anything back? Can a hug be just a hug? Can holding hands be about connection rather than reassurance? Can you allow physical closeness to become safe again? The second dimension is emotional intimacy. And emotional intimacy is the experience of being known, understood, accepted, and emotionally safe with your spouse. It means there's room in the marriage for your inner world. You can say, I'm afraid, I feel lonely, that hurt me, I'm overwhelmed, I need reassurance, I don't know what to do. And your spouse doesn't immediately turn your vulnerability into an argument. That doesn't mean that they must agree with every thought that you have, and it doesn't mean that they're responsible for fixing every emotion. It doesn't mean that they must accept accusations that are untrue. Emotional intimacy means that they can become curious before becoming defensive. So they might say, "Help me understand," or "What did that bring up for you?" Or "What did you need in that moment?" Or they can say, "I remember it differently, but I want to understand your experience." And that last sentence can be so powerful. I remember it differently, but I want to understand your experience. Two people can have interpretations of an event while still making room for each other's emotions. Emotional intimacy becomes difficult when vulnerability has not felt safe. Maybe feelings were mocked in your childhood. Maybe sadness was considered weak. Maybe anger was the only emotion allowed in your home. Maybe something vulnerable you shared in the past was used against you. Maybe your spouse has responded with defensiveness, withdrawal, or criticism, or contempt even. If vulnerability has repeatedly led to pain, your nervous system may learn to protect you by shutting down. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're cold. It may mean that you're afraid. That is why emotional intimacy requires patience. It requires self-regulation. It requires listening. It requires holding space. And holding space means I can stay present with your experience without immediately trying to fix it, change it, deny it, or make it go away. I can care about your feelings without becoming responsible for controlling them. I can listen without abandoning myself. I can remain present without agreeing with everything. And this is not codependence, it's emotional maturity. The third dimension is social intimacy. And social intimacy is about how you function as a team in the presence of other people. It's the feeling that there is still a we. It doesn't mean pretending your marriage is perfect, and it doesn't mean never disagreeing. It doesn't mean hiding serious problems. It means protecting the dignity of your spouse and the relationship. You don't embarrass your spouse to make other people laugh. You don't repeatedly correct them in public. You don't criticize them in front of family members. You don't undermine their parenting in front of your children. You don't share private marital details with people who can't be trusted to protect their relationship. You don't recruit an audience for your side. Social intimacy communicates, we may have problems, but I will not make you unsafe in the room. Think about how your spouse experiences you in social situations. Do they feel you are on their team? Or do they brace themselves because they don't know what you might say? Do you compete for attention? Do you tell stories that make them look foolish? Do you roll your eyes when they talk? Do you allow your children to disrespect them when you're angry with them too? These moments may seem small, but they create real disconnection. There's a difference between seeking wise support and building a case against your spouse. Healthy support helps you become clearer and more responsible. Unhealthy support simply helps you collect people who agree that your spouse is the problem. Social intimacy asks, when we enter a room together, does my spouse experience me as an ally? The fourth dimension is intellectual intimacy. And intellectual intimacy is a curiosity about your spouse's thoughts, ideas, interests, opinions, and changing perspectives. So many couples believe they already know each other. They say, I know what she's going to say, or I know how he thinks, or she has always been like that, or he will never change his mind. But your spouse is not one book you read years ago and placed on a shelf. Your spouse is an evolving library. There are new chapters being added all the time. Life changes people. Parenthood changes people. Success changes people. Loss and trauma change people. Healing changes people. Age changes people. Faith changes people. Your spouse may not think exactly as they did 5 years ago, but if you stopped asking questions 5 years ago, you may not know that. Intellectual intimacy grows when you remain curious. You ask them, what has been on your mind lately? Or what are you learning about yourself? Has your perspective on this changed? What are you most concerned about right now? Or what are you most excited about? What do you wish I understood? These questions communicate, I don't believe I have you completely figured out yet, or I still want to know you. This is especially important in a marriage crisis because fear often causes us to stop listening and begin analyzing. We study the tone of a text. We study the time it took them to respond. We study every facial expression. We search for evidence that the marriage is getting better or worse. We're no longer listening to understand our spouse. We're listening to determine whether we are safe. And that's understandable when you're scared, but it does not create intellectual intimacy. You need enough emotional steadiness to hear what your spouse says without immediately turning every word into a prediction about the marriage. The fifth dimension is experiential intimacy. Experiential intimacy is built through shared experiences and memories. Think about what often happens when people are dating. They're trying new restaurants, they are exploring new places, they meet new people, they stay up late talking, they take trips, they laugh together, they do things that are new and unpredictable. Then marriage becomes full of responsibility. There are jobs, children, appointments, bills, laundry, housework, homework, repairs, schedules, transportation. Eventually, this couple stops creating experiences and becomes a management team. And there's nothing wrong with routine. Routine can create stability, but if the only thing you share is responsibility, the marriage can begin to feel lifeless. Experiential intimacy does not require an expensive vacation. You could just go try a new restaurant, or try a different route home, or visit a nearby town, or cook a new meal together, or go to a class, share a project, take a walk without your phones, go back to the location of your first date, or listen to a podcast together and then discuss it. Do something neither of you is particularly good at. The experience itself is not the only point. The point is stepping out of autopilot together. Shared experiences create shared memories. They remind you that the relationship is not only about surviving the schedule, it's still capable of discovery. The sixth dimension is spiritual intimacy. And spiritual intimacy is about the meaning, purpose, beliefs, and the values you create together. For some couples, this includes prayer, scripture study, attending church, worshiping together, or serving others. But spiritual intimacy is more than attending the same church. You can sit beside each other in a worship service every week and still never talk about what you truly believe. Spiritual intimacy includes questions such as, what matters most to us? What kind of family are we trying to create? How do we want to respond to hardship? What values guide our decisions? What does commitment mean to us? What do we want our children to learn from the way that we live? Who are we becoming? What gives our lives meaning? You don't have to interpret every experience in exactly the same way. You don't have to have identical beliefs about every single issue. But spiritual intimacy asks you to make room for the deeper parts of one another. You can ask, what does this mean to you? Or what are you learning through this? What is helping you hold on? What kind of person do you want to become through this season? Spiritual intimacy allows two people to face life's biggest questions together. The seventh dimension is sexual intimacy. And we know sexual intimacy is important, but it's one part of the larger intimacy system. It can be affected by every other dimension that we have discussed today. It can be affected by emotional safety, physical affection, trust, resentment, exhaustion, betrayal, stress, trauma, health, hormones, body image, communication, the quality of friendship. This is why telling a struggling couple to simply have more sex rarely solves the actual problem. Sometimes the problem is not beginning in the bedroom. One person may not feel emotionally safe. One person may feel pressured. One may have learned that every form of affection comes with an expectation. One may feel repeatedly rejected. One may be carrying unresolved hurt. One may not know how to communicate what they need. Healthy sexual intimacy requires honest and respectful communication. It requires consent. It requires curiosity instead of entitlement. It requires both people to be able to talk about what helps them feel connected, what creates fear or pressure, and what they need in order to feel safe. Sexual intimacy becomes more meaningful when it grows from the other 6 dimensions rather than being used as the only measurement of whether the marriage is healthy. So now I want to connect all 7 dimensions with another important teaching from Dr. Matt Townsend. He describes a progression from codependence to independence to interdependence. Many people believe independence is the healthiest possible relationship goal. They may say, my feelings are my responsibility and your feelings are yours. And there's a lot of truth in that because you are responsible for your thoughts, for your choices, your reactions, your healing, your boundaries, your emotional regulation. Your spouse cannot heal your past for you. They cannot create your worth, and they cannot regulate every emotion. They cannot become responsible for your entire inner world. But independence is not the highest goal of marriage. Interdependence is. Codependence says you are responsible for how I feel. If you would change, I would be okay. I cannot remain steady unless you reassure me. My behavior is your fault. Independence says I'm responsible for myself. I can regulate my emotions. I can choose how I respond. I will not abandon myself in order to manage you. Interdependence says I'm responsible for myself and I understand that my choices affect you. I will regulate myself and I will also help create an emotionally safe environment. I will not ask you to heal me, but I will allow you to support me. I will not become responsible for all your emotions, but I will take responsibility for the way that I treat you. That is a much more mature form of love. Marriage does not mean you become responsible for every feeling your spouse experiences, but it also does not mean you get to say, your feelings are your problem, I can do whatever I want. We affect each other. Our words matter. Our tone matters. Our timing matters. Our withdrawal matters. Our criticism matters. Our affection matters. Our honesty matters. Our repair matters. You may not be responsible for healing your spouse's trauma, but you can choose to not repeatedly aggravate it. You may not be able to remove their fear, but you can become more predictable. You may not create their self-worth, but you can stop using contempt, rejection, or criticism as weapons. You may not regulate their nervous system for them, but you can learn to remain present while they regulate themselves. Interdependence is 2 people learning to stand on their own feet while also choosing to reach for each other. Imagine a husband comes home from work and barely speaks. His wife immediately feels anxious. Her mind starts telling a story. He's upset with me, or he's pulling away. He doesn't want to be married anymore. I must have done something wrong. So she begins asking questions. What's wrong? Are you mad? Why are you acting like this? And he feels pressured and says, nothing's wrong, leave me alone. Now her fear increases, so she follows him. He withdraws further. She becomes more emotional. He becomes more defensive. This is often described as a communication problem, but it is affecting several dimensions of intimacy at once. There's little emotional intimacy because neither person feels safe enough to express what is truly happening. There's little intellectual intimacy because they are assuming instead of asking with curiosity. There's little physical intimacy because their bodies are becoming guarded. There may be no experiential intimacy because most of their life has become stress and responsibility. There may be limited social intimacy if they later complain about each other to their friends or involve the children. The wife's work may be learning to regulate the fear before pursuing him. She may need to tell herself, I notice my fear. His silence does not automatically mean rejection, and I can give him a moment and ask clearly later. The husband's work may be understanding that his withdrawal affects the emotional environment. So he could say, I had a difficult day and I'm not angry with you. I need about 20 minutes to decompress and then I will come find you. That is interdependence. She's not making him responsible for removing all of her anxiety, and he's not acting as though his behavior has no impact. Both take responsibility. Both create safety. Both contribute to intimacy. Okay, I want you to rate your marriage from 1 to 10 in each of the 7 areas. Physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, social intimacy, experiential intimacy, spiritual intimacy, sexual intimacy. Don't use this assessment to attack your spouse. Instead, ask, where are we already strong? Where have we become disconnected? Which area has been neglected? Which form of intimacy would have the greatest positive effect on the others? What is one thing I can do this week? Not what can I force my spouse to do? What can I do? Maybe you offer a hug with no expectation attached. Maybe you ask a thoughtful question and listen without correcting. Maybe you apologize for making a joke at your spouse's expense. Maybe you plan a small shared experience. Maybe you ask what your spouse has been feeling lately. Maybe you talk about the values you want your family to live by. Maybe you create a calm and honest conversation about sexual connection. Just choose one area. Choose one action. Intimacy is not usually rebuilt through one dramatic conversation. It is built through repeated experiences of safety, of curiosity, respect, and connection. Dr. Matt Townsend talks about becoming one within your relationships. Becoming one does not mean becoming the same person. It doesn't mean losing your identity, and it doesn't mean ignoring your needs. It doesn't mean avoiding disagreement. It means becoming two emotionally responsible people who are learning how to create a shared life. It means moving beyond codependence. It means developing the strength of independence. Then it means choosing interdependence. You take responsibility for your emotional world. You allow your spouse to take responsibility for theirs. And you both recognize that the way you show up affects the environment of the marriage. You intentionally build physical intimacy. You intentionally build emotional intimacy. You intentionally build social intimacy. You intentionally build intellectual intimacy, experiential intimacy, spiritual intimacy, and sexual intimacy. Not all at once, not perfectly, but consistently. Intimacy grows through small moments that repeatedly say, I still see you. I still want to know you. I want to understand you, and I am willing to reach for you. And I want us to keep becoming one. So thank you for listening to the Focus Podcast today. If this episode helped you, share it with someone who may need a broader and more hopeful way of understanding intimacy. And take a moment today to choose one of the 7 dimensions and ask yourself, what is one small thing I can do to create more connection this week? I will see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with me today on the Focus Podcast. If something stood out or helped you in some way, feel free to share it or leave a quick review. It means a lot. Keep showing up, keep growing, and I'll catch you in the next episode.